Hey everybody, Blue Dooley in the garage, and today we are going to get started on the Bruder conversion to make it RC instead of just a push toy truck. Got the grand hauler out here to get some frame measurements off of. Got my RC cola. The wife actually got me a couple of more garage heaters, some small ones, so despite being only 20 degrees outside, it's about 55, 60 in the garage right now, which is, actually it's pretty nice. So, let me get you a little closer. We'll go over some of the parts we got for this truck already and what I'm going to be using for the frame, what radio I'm using, all that I have right now. The Fly Sky FSI 10. It is not converted for surface use, so this doesn't have a spring return. That's okay. But it does have is the ability to change which sticks control which functions. So on the grand hauler, I've already tried this out. This right stick here does the steering and the throttle. So the whole truck is just driven by this. On the grand hauler, this three-way switch is the turn signals, and this three-way switch is the transmission. This stick doesn't do anything. For the Snowplow, I'm going to have it set up similarly. This truck is not going to have a 3-speed transmission. We'll get to the transmission here in a minute. But what I'm hoping to do is drive the truck with this stick, and since this stick does not have a return, this will be what I use to lift the plow. So all the way down, the plow will be down. Push it up, the plow will stay up, and then I will probably use this stick here for the dump bed. Okay, here's the transmission, transfer case, and the motor that are going to be stuffed into the Bruder. Up first, we have the RC 4-wheel drive scale R4 transmission. It's just a single speed unit. My only complaint, even though I haven't run it, is it doesn't come with the motor mounting bracket. They sell that separately, and it's back ordered until February, even though I tried to order it back in October. So I don't want to use the scale V8 because this new of a Mack doesn't have a V8. That's really kind of aggravating that they didn't include the motor mount with the transmission. But after holding it up next to the grand hauler's frame, these tabs are just, it's a 1/2 millimeter too wide to fit in a stock grand hauler or a Tamiya 14th scale semi. But that's okay because I'm not using 100% scale frame rails. To power both the axles, RC 4-wheel drive disruptor transfer case. And to power it, Hobbywing, I actually love Hobbywing's products. The Quick Run Fusion brushless system for a crawler, the 2-in-1. So brushless motor, ESC, all in a nice compact package. It has the programming card with it. This particular one is the 1800 kilovolt one. I did want a little bit more pep than the 1200 would probably give this truck for plowing. But after seeing a few reviews on this particular system, at low speed it's really, really smooth. And that's kind of what I wanted. It also has that FOC technology, which is kind of like a cruise control, I guess. You could like bump up your throttle trim so the truck just kind of chugs along at a slow pace, and the ESC will keep it moving at that same pace no matter what the terrain does or the obstacles the truck has to crawl over. So that's kind of cool. As I've said, I've seen a few videos on it. It looks really, really smooth, and it also frees up some space under the cab, in the chassis, because I don't have a separate speed controller for the motor. It's actually a pretty compact package. It will fit. I'll take this out of the box and we will put it underneath the hood and show you. Alright, there's the motor sitting underneath the hood where it'll go. Need to do some more trimming. I've already took the plastic motor that was out of here and the fake radiator. There's a lot of trimming left to do on the body. I need to remove these posts. But When this is mounted up a little lower, it'll also be a little further towards the rear. The hood will close down on it, and you won't even hardly know it's there. The steering servo, I think, will probably be mounted frame rails underneath the motor. Not 100% sure yet. Or as the fuel tank for the driver's side is hollowed out, I can actually hide the servo in here, mount it further back underneath the cab. This box is also hollow, so I can hide another servo in here. This will probably hide the servo for the differential locks on the axles, which are kind of cool. We will get to those next. The axles, all three of them, I got off of Asia Tees. These are Hercules Hobbies axles for 6-wheel drive. And they have remote diff lock, which is kind of cool. Wasn't something I was actually looking for, and I had thought I had ordered just the straight non-locked variant, but these showed up instead, so I'm not going to complain. They are a little more scale, at least this intermediate axle is a little more scale than the Tamiya unit, as the driveline is offset a little bit and goes straight through like a real truck's axle. Of course, on Macks, they don't use front load, they would actually use a top load. But I'm not going to get that picky on this build. We are, however, using standard Tamiya 10M axle suspension, leaf springs in the rear. And then I picked up the suspension for the RC 4-wheel drive Armageddon truck, which is just 2 leaves and some really nicely machined and scale looking shackles on the swing shackle on the rear, and then of course just a standard shackle up front. I did find out, however, that while the Hercules Hobbies axles have the same bolt pattern for the suspension to bolt to the axle like a Tamiya, the RC 4-wheel drive truck, the frame's a lot wider. So these need to mount to the outside of the frame like this, whereas I think on the RC 4-wheel drive one, they actually mount like this and the frame rail sits on top. But that's okay because I actually still have some regular leaf spring mounts, like the Tamiya style leaf spring mounts for that I was going to use on the trailer, but since I'm not using it on the trailer, I can use it for the front of the truck. I have a set of just standard leaf springs, but they don't have the holes to bolt it down to the front axle. The RC 4-wheel drive ones do. They bolt in really nice, so happy about that. Tires, these are RC 4-wheel drive super wides mounted on the matte finish Tamiya hex drive wheels. So Tamiya does make a hex drive front for the 1/14 scale trucks. The rears are RC 4-wheel drive King of the Roads. I'm short a pair, that's why they're sitting like this. And then these are also stock Tamiya rims. Everything bolts up really nice to the Hercules Hobbies stuff, so that's nice to know. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to run all of these tires on this truck. I think I might try to find some crawler tires and just run kind of a wide super single all the way around, as while that's not 100% scale to a Mack snowplow, I'm kind of decided this one's going to be like a custom Mack snowplow, not one you'd see on a city or state highway. This one is owned by a private person and spec'd out a little more cool than what you get with the city and state vehicles. For frame rails, that's another thing I'm deviating from, as I'm just going to use solid flat stock. This is actually the same thickness as the frame rails on the Tamiya, but I wanted to give the truck a lot of weight, especially a lot of weight down low, as snowplows, one, aren't really light, and two, by the time I hide all the servos, get the tanks and the fuel tanks on, the air tanks, the suspension, I'm actually hoping to build a wing plow off of this side. So with the dump bed down, you're never going to see the frame rails anyways. So I'm not too concerned with using scale frame rails. Besides, this was cheaper anyways. And I can weld it together. So I'm actually going to weld up the frame, at least at the very rear and up here at the front where the plow mounts. And then I will probably 3D print some other parts. And of course the transmission will space out in here. So that's what we're using for the frame. For steering and the lockers, I picked up a pair of, you can't see them, Hexfly 25 kilogram servos. These are digital and waterproof, I believe. So I'm not really familiar with these. I've seen a few other guys use them, and they were only, I believe, $40 for a pair. So I have a steering servo, and I'll use the other servo for either the differential locks, or I might get some micro servos for that. The diff locks are cable actuated, like you've seen on Traxxas and, well, any product that uses locking differentials. I believe airplanes also use this kind of a method for controlling ailerons and flaps and whatnot. So those, all three axles have locks in them. We have the frame parts I need, and yeah. So that's kind of where we're at right now at the with parts. I'll show you how much of the truck I've got disassembled. Still need to do a little more disassembly on that, but I wanted to leave it sort of whole so I could measure how long the frame rails need to be. Okay, on to the Bruder toy itself. As I showed you already, cut out the motor. I cut out all the axles. The dump bed actually comes off pretty easy. As it just kind of clips over some pins on the plastic chassis right here. The dump bed does need some modification, as this pivot point's a little too far forward. And the fenders that come on the dump bed, besides also being a little too far forward, I'm not going to use, because we don't run fenders on dump trucks over here in the States. So these will get cut off. Disassembly of the dump bed was pretty easy. These just have a couple of little tabs you push, and that comes out. As I said, the dump bed, we'll get the back end of the truck over here. We can get some light on it. Whee! Just has two little posts, and you just spread the box a little bit and it comes right off. As I've said, I've already gutted out the motor. So the last thing to do is separate the cab from the frame. Take this other box off, this other little tank. And then the bumper actually comes into about here. So the bumper will need a bit of modification. And the plastic chassis is actually it's pretty rigid. So if you wanted to go a little cheaper route and just bolt parts to this, you'd probably be all right. I wanted a little more scale, and I wanted to change the wheelbase a little bit. So we will work on getting that cab off and show you what's left. The cab comes off pretty easy. Just has a couple of tabs around it. Ended up cutting this one off. But the rest of them, I just kind of stuck a flathead screwdriver down next to it, twisted it to break the plastic off of this, and then the cab lifts right off. And there's actually quite a bit of room in the cab. I'm thinking I'll have plenty of room to hide most everything, as I think I'm going to have to trim this out so the motor fits anyways. But I'd probably put the receiver up under the dash. I might be able to fit the light kit here light kit underneath this part of the cab under the seats. and be able to have an interior still. So that makes me pretty happy. The cab is pretty well detailed. I'm not sure how Bruder scales their trucks and their toys or equipment and stuff, because this is 1/16. The Grand Hauler or the King Hauler, all the Tamiya stuff, is 1/14. And the only difference between that cab and this cab is how tall the cab is between here and here. The fenders are the same width. Its overall height was the same. It's just that, in fact, actually this part of the cab appears to be the same dimension as the King Hauler. It's just this height here is what's different. So that's a little strange to me. It has a sound kit in it, and lights. Fire, police, engine. I probably won't use this. So I'll have to fill this hole in the top of the cab in a little bit. I might steal these lights though. The only thing about putting a light kit I am worried about is, unlike the new bright bodies, these lenses aren't very thick. So mounting LEDs in the headlights will be a little difficult. And these look like they're pretty, they're just molded out of yellow plastic. So not 100% sure how the light kit's going to work on this truck yet or not. Everything on this chassis is snapped together. There's little tabs here for holding the tank on. That's what's holding on the other side. Those got broke. The truck fell off the bookshelf one time. But it does. It pretty much snaps together. Really nice and easy. So, oh, Pennsylvania plates. German toy with Pennsylvania plates. That's kind of funny. So what I need to do now is measure from bumper to the mud flaps, and that's going to be how long I'll make my frame rails, as the leaf springs come out almost to the bumper. So I can't have this much plastic hanging out. So I'll measure that, and then we'll cut out a couple of pieces and go from there. Okay, got my steel cut to length. I squared up the chassis, so from this corner to the opposite rear corner, this corner to the opposite rear corner are both the same length. They're the same width apart, front and rear. So I marked on my workbench with a Sharpie, just to keep everything even. These magnets are kind of holding everything pretty good, and the body actually sits really well on both the front and rear. In fact, actually there's a couple of little tabs it's sitting on, and those little drop down pieces on the bottom of the cab actually sit between the frame rails real nicely. So that step is going good. The next step is to round up all of my little leaf spring mounts and figure out where this front axle needs to sit. Okay, did some measuring. Got a couple holes drilled, and now we're going to tap them. I found a set of DeWalt metric taps at D&B Supply, which is a kind of a farm and ranch store. It's not too terribly bad, and it goes down to 3 millimeters. When you're tapping a hole, you always want to use some kind of lubricant and really take your time. If you feel it starting to bind, back it out a little bit and just really take your time and go slow. That way you don't damage the bit or break it or get messed up threads in the part you're trying to thread. So I did change my frame rail spacing a little bit. I've decided to use the RC four-wheel drive hangers, and I will just adjust the rear suspension because it'll still fit even with a little bit wider frame rail. Again, you just really want to take your time. Don't force it, just let the teeth cut. This is a pretty stout steel probably for this small of a bit. So I've already kind of boogered up the threads on it a little because I tried to go too fast. So when threading or tapping, just take your time. No matter how fast you want to go slower than you want to go. Already got one spring mounted up on the other frame rail. These are the front mounts. Then I'll mark and drill and tap the next mounts. So we will catch back up once I get that done. Alright, well, after a few fiddling and some setbacks, I trimmed out the front of the truck. I took the grill off so I wouldn't mess up the chrome grill. But to get the chassis and the body to sit right, I actually had to mount the leaves to the top of the frame. So I actually just flipped them 180 degrees and using some different leaf spring mounts. But that got the frame low enough so that the cab and the hood will sit lower. Get the hood out of the way. The motor and the transmission are just kind of sitting in there because of course I don't have the motor mounting plate for the R4 transmission, which is frustrating as all heck. But there's plenty of room, even with it sitting here. By the time everything's buttoned up and sitting level, there'll be plenty of room for the hood to clear the motor, and plenty of room for the motor to clear the axle. Get that out of the way. Transmission out of the way. So you can see I notched out the body a little more around here. I'll cut this whole plastic piece out. That's what the underside of the body looks like right now. I got a piece of metal in here just to hold it up a little bit. So when I flip the frame rails around, that actually put the cab and the hood a little too low, which is okay. I can print some mounts to raise the body up enough to get proper clearance under that. It's a shame I hacked up so much of this body because it is a nice body, but there we go. Like I said, just flip these around so the frame rails are hanging down instead of sticking up. I need to drill the hole for this cross pin to go between the two leaves, and the rear suspension will be somewhat mounted up. I'm not sure what I'm going to do on these shackles yet, but the only thing that's really kind of a problem now is actually the transmission fits in between the frame rails with room to spare now. The disruptor is a hair wider than the what the frame rails are going to end up being. That's no big deal, as this will have to sit down a little bit anyways. So slow and steady progress. I actually went and got some new steel so I can just booger these up, as I already did once, and I'll get all the screw holes where I need, and I'll make sure one of these is good, and then I'll just mark off where the holes need to be on this one, and I'll use this as my drill guide to drill out the new frame rails. And yeah, that's where we're at on this project. I'm gonna wrap it up for now, as kind of tired and I have some other things to get done today. So stay tuned for another video this weekend. We're going to solder up the wireless controller for the winch in the wife's HPI Venture. So we will catch you in the next video. As always, please click like and subscribe if you haven't already, and have a good weekend.